So I truly believe everybody who works in a practice can relate to this. We're inundated with regulation, right? And I think what some people outside of healthcare don't realize that for every regulation you get, there's usually five or six new policies that come from like even one regulation, sometimes even more. So if you look at something like how to secure a patient portal, there we can get guidance or regulation from authorizing entities that we have to do that. But from that, they expect us to write policies that relate to that. And that can be anywhere from 5 to 10, sometimes 20 policies having to deal with that. So if you're someone who is in a practice and you're getting these new policies sent your way, every time you turn around, there's a final rule coming out or proposed final rule coming out. And we get these multiple times a year. So I call that policy fatigue because you get so used to seeing them that you start to think, oh, it's just another regulation coming out. Oh, we'll just, it's like give the analogy of like a stick of paper on a wall. If in your office, if someone comes in your office and they see a piece of paper on the wall for the first time, they notice that paper. If they see it 100 times, they stop noticing it altogether. It's the same way with policy fatigue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, where we help practice managers grow smarter, not harder. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the head of marketing at Talkie AI, where we deliver AI medical receptionist voice agents for medical practices. And my guest today is Shereese Maynard, speaker, writer, healthcare strategist, startup consultant, and fractional CMO and compliance chief for multiple companies. Shereese, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you on the show. Super excited to record. Once again, this is near the end of my day recording today, and I'm really excited to finish my day off on a high note by recording a podcast episode. This is honestly my favorite thing to do. So I think we're going to have a fun one today. I appreciate our conversations before the show as well, and I'm excited to dig into the topics for today. But first, one thing that we do on this show that some other shows don't do is we don't start with the business side of things right off the bat, but we start with a bit of a warm-up. So I wanted to ask you, Shereese, for the watchers and listeners to get to know you from a personal side first, what is the most fun thing you've done this year thus far?
I would say I come from a very large family, so the most fun thing I've done this summer is celebrate my mom's birthday because it's rare that we all are in one place at the same time, and so we don't always all of us get up for her birthday, but we were all there this year, so it was pretty exciting, and that was the most fun. It was at a huge park. All of my mom's children, grandchildren, and that type of thing were there, and it was so much fun.
Okay. So how many people were there?
Oh my gosh. I would say about 75. The thing that we did
What?
though that was really I'm not kidding. Um, we played a game called because my dad passed away years ago, but my mom so we call ourselves One of Evas, which is my mom's name. And so we play this game called One of Evas. So it causes you to recall certain things from the history of the family that everybody should know. So we play it almost like a bingo game, and it's exciting because some of the stuff people come up with, and you go, "I don't remember that happening." So it turns into this whole thing, and we get into a discussion. It's so funny when you hear people's different perspectives on a particular event that may have happened in the family.
Okay, so it's about something that happened that some people might not remember anymore, or they remember it completely differently, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're getting other people's perspectives on something that should have been definitive, but everybody's got a different take on it.
Okay, so what's one of the top family stories then? You got me curious. I have to ask.
There was it's weird stuff. So I think that's why it's so much fun even for the grandkids. So one year, my husband might not love me telling this, but one year my husband took a trip down a flight of stairs. This was years ago. He
Oh
fell
gosh.
down a flight of stairs. I mean, he didn't get hurt or anything, but of course, there was laughter and all that kind of stuff. But what the question was, when that famous fall down the stairs happened, what was the food that went flying around and hit the walls? And so, of course, it was definitive what actually happened, but everybody had a different answer. One person said pasta was on the wall, and this was because the time of year we go away is always like right before Thanksgiving. So everybody had a different answer for what the food that went flying, and we were like, how can we were all there. Why does everybody have a different answer? But it was so funny. Even the nieces and nephew had different recollections of how that all went down. So that was my favorite one.
So what was it in the end?
It was, potato salad,
Okay.
which blew me away
Oh,
because
no,
I was like,
okay.
"I don't
Yeah,
remember that at all."
okay. Did somebody say turkey just because it was close to Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we had some weird
Okay.
so I think some of the answers people picked were based on what we normally have. So, my mom makes an Asian dish called, yakame, and someone said that, and I was like, "I don't think we had that night." And salad was one of them. Pasta was one of them. It was weird answers, but yeah, I don't think anybody actually got it right. It was, potato salad, so
That's so interesting. I feel like I should do that with my family too. I don't even know what my parents, for example, would point out as like the top family stories. Well, we did have one when we were coming back from Hungary and we took a wrong turn because we had the GPS set up wrong. And instead of driving, on a smooth road, we went on this kind of mountain road. Coming back from Hungary, our car was like full of wine because Hungarian wine is, uh very good and also quite cheap in Hungary. So we barely made it out of that. We had to actually get out of the car as we were backing out from that road. Some people had to get off of the car because, the suspension was too low. So I guess that was one of the top family stories there. We got through it, but yeah, in particular, my grandma was like, "We're doomed." So,
uh-huh.
yeah, anyway. Okay, that's awesome. That's a
But
great
they
one
make
to
for
add.
really
Yeah.
fun, family games, yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I'm gonna play that with my family, and I hope this is the first piece of inspiration that we can share with our watchers and listeners today. And that one is from a personal point of view, but we'll definitely talk about healthcare as well. So, Shereese, you might have seen from other episodes of the show, and if somebody's a regular watcher or listener, they know what's coming. But the first thing on our agenda is the number one tip question. So, the traditional question of the show, and here it comes: what is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice?
So I'm going to give you a tip that I give to a lot of practices, and it is a tip that is not terribly expensive, but it has the highest return on investment that a practice can invest in. So if I had to boil it down to one tip, my tip I would give and that I give often is to invest in developing your frontline staff. And I say that because the frontline staff of your practice is the first line of trust to establish trust between the patient and the provider, right? It's the first voice they hear on the phone. It's the first face they see. It's the first smile they receive. And there is no marketing campaign or automation or anything we do in this business that will return on investment what having a informed frontline staff will do for you. So when you train and empower them and retain exceptional frontline staff, you create a consistent patient experience, which is what we want all of our patients to have. And that drives loyalty, referrals, and trust. And that's what we look to get from our patients. And in healthcare, trust is the currency of growth, right? So if you invest in your frontline staff, empower them, invest in their continued training, and invest in letting them know that you appreciate them, 100% that return will come back to you 100 times over. And that's my best piece of advice, investing in your frontline staff.
I love that. I love that. And you tied a bow on it at the end there, at the beginning and then that's awesome. So I always like to dive deeper into the tip, and I would love to do that here as well. A practice manager is listening to this, hearing this piece of advice, invest more in my frontline staff. Okay, cool. 100% agreed. How do I do that, and where do I start?
So the best place to start is education. The frontline staff tends to get overlooked in terms of continued education. And it can be very costly to a practice when you don't invest in it. And that comes in terms of confidentiality, patient engagement, using your internal structures and your workflows. You have to continuously train your staff on that. And you can do it natively, or you can do it in a way that is, very not native, that you have regular trainings every so often, but you have to keep them educated. When we don't keep our staff up to date in their training and on the policies and the different things that are going on with our practice, they tend to carry forward a message that may not be the message anymore. They're going to go with what they know. I've also seen where frontline staff will create their own workflows when they're not educated continuously on what's supposed to happen. And that can cause you problems with trust, compliance, reimbursement. So the first place you start is with education. That's the best thing you can do. Other than that, also, like I said, keeping them involved in the running of the practice. don't be afraid to tell your frontline staff if, a patient complains about something and they might have ideas with how you can do things different. I think a lot of times we think of frontline staff as that they have nothing to do with the administration of the practice. They don't have a voice in running the practice and that type of thing. And that's pretty much a mistake because, like I said, that's your first line of trust between the patient and the practice. So you want to involve them in making sure the whole experience that the patient has coming through the door from, I always say, from door to floor to when they leave, is a positive one. And we can only do that by continuously educating the staff.
Okay, that's really cool. I love the detail. So I'm wondering if somebody is again a practice manager. That's the kind of the target audience of the show, and why do you think it happens that this continued education gets neglected by practice managers? What kind of obstacles are in the way, and what would you say to somebody facing those obstacles?
Well, if you look at how things are nowadays, we're so all overly concerned with innovation, right? So usually, because I consult with a lot of practices, and they are looking to bring on like the latest innovation. Oh, we need to add this, that, and the other. But they forget that someone has to use that. The end user is their frontline staff, and that tends to get lost. It's more about getting something in place instead of how that thing will function in that place. So I don't think it's intentional, but I think when it comes to the hierarchy of need, educating the staff tends to take a backseat to other things that practices feel they need instead of looking at it from a practical standpoint. If you have a great frontline staff that you've invested in, what you will find is that your current workflows will work better. And then maybe you don't have to spend as much money updating or adding on new things. It's like you can add on as much technology as you want, but if no one knows how to use it to care for the patients or to help empower the patients and staff, it's not going to work. You're still going to have some of the same problems you've had. So the best thing you can do is if you're looking to bring some new innovation on, make sure the training of the staff and to keeping the staff updated is included in that. And I think when I consult with practices, that's one of the things that they often overlook. It's like, oh, well, we trained them when they first got hired, or they get, annual training. But it's like, I always explain, it's like, hey, you're bringing in this new thing. You can't just give them like that one off training when it comes on board, when we go take it online and think it's going to be okay. They're going to have to learn to use this in a way that works within their workflow. So that takes education, and it takes education over time. It's not a 1 day thing. It's not a 1 hour thing.
I absolutely agree with that. This is something that we see day to day at Talkie as well. We introduce these AI agents for the front desk for our clients, and there's a variety of ways to introduce a product like that. But we tend to take an approach of there has to be consulting to go with it, right? Because AI, it's almost like we're dealing with an alien life form, right? It's so different from the ways computers usually work, and in particular when you put voice in the equation, because Talkie's a voice AI, it definitely helps to show what the AI can do, what it can't do, how you will be able to see, for example, transcripts of the conversations, how you can interact with the system. So I absolutely agree that it's crucial, and not just annually, not just during onboarding, but at the point, I guess what we're arriving at is it needs to be at the point of innovation when you're introducing something new that you set aside this budget of of time or effort to also run the training. If I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and it just really, like I said, it brings greater returns because, you don't want staff that you train them that one time. And then, like I said, what I find is that they start creating their own workarounds. And then you're wondering why certain things aren't working or why certain things aren't getting done. It's because the staff hasn't had that continuous training. And there's no budget for it. So they start to create their own things. Let's say if you wanted dates put into your workflow a certain way. I always tell people there's like 12 ways to put in a date. So what if one staff member says, oh, I can't remember how we're supposed to do that. I'm just going to put it in this way. It could mean a totally different thing. And all of a sudden you've got a compliance problem. So it's worth your while to continuously educate them. And it's less expensive than constantly replacing or paying back money because of being out of compliance. So I think it's a worthwhile investment. And like I said, it continuously gives you return on that investment.
So investing in developing your frontline staff, investing in education, we got that tip down, and we'll be adding it to our vault. There isn't like a literal vault yet, but I should at one point cut out all of the tips from all of the episodes and make that like one long video, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for adding that
Or do
in.
a little
And
dashboard, something that like
yeah,
an ebook or something you can give to your audience, like with all the tips in it.
Yeah, that idea has been floated, but we're still kind of collecting the critical mass of advice from this podcast, you know? Anyway, thanks for mentioning that. So now that we know your best advice, let's talk a little bit about where it's coming from. Could you tell the watchers and listeners a little bit more about yourself, your business, who you help and how you help them before we move on to the rest of the show?
Sure. So I'm a health care strategist by trade. I started my journey in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for over 20 years. I started in pediatrics, and I came along in healthcare at a time when we were first starting to adopt innovation and different technologies, where before everything was done on paper. So I was a policy specialist for pediatrics for the practice for the company I was with, and I also developed their when we first started coming online with different innovation and stuff, I mapped that all out for them. So when we started networking, and I don't mean networking like meeting people, I mean networking like the technology side. I was fundamental with them with that. So I got into healthcare IT and healthcare policy at a time that it was very exciting. We would starting with like meaningful use and HIPAA and all the things. So I developed from there and I became COO of that first company I was with. And then I left there and went to Global Medical and became that COO. And then I moved on and started doing my own thing. And what I noticed was, and this is how I guess became successful in this business, is that I noticed that people coming into healthcare with their technology and stuff had no idea how the healthcare ecosystem worked, had no understanding of how complex our regulations and our policies are. So because I had that structure under my belt, I became known for that. Like, oh, if you're coming with technology, you don't understand how this whole thing's work. Talk to Shereese about it; she can tell you. And one of my first referrals came from like the head nurse for the state of Maryland, and it just spun off from there. So, like I said, I think I came in at a really good time, and I think because of the education I gave myself and that I immersed myself in policy. I love healthcare policy. That I was able to create this nice little niche for myself where I understood both sides of the fence, and could help people understand how to navigate bringing their healthcare solutions to scale and to market them successfully. So that's how I started, and now I speak about it, and then I write about it, speak about it, travel around the country, helping companies scale their products and improve their compliance models, and just run their practices and stuff. And I've been doing it, like I said, for over 20 years, and I love it.
That's such an exotic thing to hear. I love healthcare policy, you know.
I know.
You must be in a really small minority there. That sounds like something that you should put on a
I'm sure.
t-shirt or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. That's great. You know, you mentioned speaking and writing, and I will just very bluntly ask you to please plug your column here because when the first time I heard about it, I was so amazed by it. So could you please talk about the column a little bit?
Oh, sure. So the column we were speaking about is I know we no longer want to hit that HIT. So it came from the idea from we hear a lot about when companies raise money, when their valuations come out, when they have successful series rounds and stuff. And then what happens to those companies? Well, they don't all scale, right? They can't all sustain themselves and that type of thing. And I have always felt that while we learn some things in successful, we learn a lot more things in failures, but no one talks about them. So I decided, I was like, well, let's take a deep dive to look at why some of these companies fail, if some of us in the industry predicted their failures and where that all came from. And I said, how can I make a fun spin on this, and have it be a learning model for people? So I came up with, something that everybody can relate to, relationships. And I said, we no longer want to hit that because it worked with health IT. And so I put out a couple of, feeler articles to see how people thought about it. And they thought it was funny and they understood the whole relationship versus health IT thing. So it caught on and I just kept writing about it. But what it does is it allows us to look at when companies don't scale or when they're not successful, what went wrong in this equation and what can we all learn from it so those mistakes aren't made again. And then some of it was because that some of those failures are predictable in the beginning. What we see in health IT, we'll see a lot of companies overvalued by outsiders, and those of us in the space say, well, they don't understand how this works. That's never going to work because of A, B, C, and D. And with those columns that I write, it allows us to open up those conversations to say, okay, maybe we should be evaluating these companies at such a high dollar amount when we haven't considered these things. So I just found that little niche. I even give talks on it when I present at conferences because I'm like, again, what can we learn from these failures? And it's not a way to like laugh at a company that didn't make it or anything like that, but it's like, what are the hard lessons here we can all learn from? And how can we move forward and make the next model better or make it sustainable or help it to scale? So yeah, that's where it came from. And it's just been, a good thing for me monetarily and also just growing in popularity. So I'm very excited to offer that to people.
Yeah, and I definitely wanted to include it in this episode. So once again, it's I no longer want to hit that with a capital HIT for healthcare IT.
Exactly.
It's such a great column. I loved reading it, and also it was inspiring to me. Right now I'm in healthcare and in marketing, right? So it was inspiring for me to see that hey, you actually can inject humor and color and flavor into content in this space, which I think is really important because these are important topics, but also topics that can put people to sleep a little bit sometimes. So it's good to
Yeah, you
add
have
this
to put a
additional
different
flavor,
spin
right?
on things. Yeah, we're not in the sexiest business, so we have to kind of dress it up a little bit or add a little humor because some of the things that we deal with in this business are, very serious things. Like if we get it wrong, at the end of that line is a real patient that has real needs. So it's like we deal with serious stuff on a daily and what better to do than add a little humor into the situation? My favorite thing is to, relate it to like dating and relationships, having, you know, been through a lot in healthcare. I'm like, if I relate it to relationships, people will understand. And that's how I explain it to leaders to get them to listen. Refer to health IT as like great sex. We're all trying to get to the same place, but trying to find new and creative ways of getting there. So I like to, I use relationships to get people to understand here's where we are and here's where we're trying to get to. And we've got all these things, lessons we can learn to get to that place.
I honestly think, despite the fact that we're talking about, a humorous layer, like you mentioned, punching through the noise and getting remembered and actually relaying the information in a way that it's remembered, in some cases it can be life or death. So thank you for the inspiration. And I'm glad I got this podcast platform now to spread it around and help people also discover that there's other ways to talk about healthcare and healthcare IT. So that's really cool. And another thing you mentioned, and definitely something I wanted to dive into with you here today, is that you mentioned you're deep into policy, healthcare policy, right? And recently I saw, even on your LinkedIn, actually, that's where I found it first, this term of policy fatigue, and I wanted to talk about that for a little while. So could you describe this phenomenon a little bit more, what it looks like in practices today, and what they can do to actually address policy fatigue? Just let's talk about this problem and let's help the watchers and listeners address this.
So I truly believe everybody who works in a practice can relate to this. We're inundated with regulation, right? And I think what some people outside of healthcare don't realize that for every regulation you get, there's usually 5 or 6 new policies that come from like even one regulation, sometimes even more. So if you look at something like how to secure a patient portal, there we can get guidance or regulation from authorizing entities that we have to do that. But from that, they expect us to write policies that relate to that. And that can be anywhere from 5 to 10, sometimes 20 policies having to deal with that. So if you're someone who is in a practice, you're getting these new policies sent your way. Every time you turn around, there's a final rule coming out or proposed final rule coming out. And we get these multiple times a year. So I call that policy fatigue because you get so used to seeing them that you start to think, oh, it's just another regulation coming out. Oh, we'll just, it's like give the analogy of like a stick of paper on a wall. If in your office, if someone comes in your office and they see a piece of paper on the wall for the first time, they notice that paper. If they see it 100 times, they stop noticing it altogether. It's the same way with policy fatigue. You start to get these policies so often, you start overlooking them. And this is a problem in healthcare because it's happening so much lately. We're getting things in, we're getting things out. We're very over regulated. And if you come into healthcare space, what you find that out is very common. So psychiatrists call this habituation. That's what the term I'm looking for. And it shows up in like staff overlooking like compliance steps, right? And simply because the policy has become the norm, we're getting these all the time. So it's policy fatigue. And to alleviate policy fatigue, you have to prioritize two things, in my opinion. I always say, in my opinion, because others might have other thoughts on this, but clarity and reinforcement. If you know that you're getting, you know, rec- churning policies out on a daily. And like I said, in my job, I'm writing policy every single day for somebody. So if you're seeing that on a regular, you have to find a way to make policies clear and a way to reinforce them in a way that sticks with staff. So one of the things I like to think about is like streamlining and simplification. One tool that people can use is they have chat PDF now, or you can use chat GBT and some of those other ones. If a regulation comes out, put it in a PDF format for your staff and let them break it down themselves into bite-sized pieces by putting it like in a LLM model and asking it, hey, how much of this has to do with, let's say, data security or whatever. And so they can break it down into little teeny tiny pieces. And also internally, you should be doing the same thing. When you write a policy for staff, make sure they know this is what affects them. This is how it's going to be interpreted, and this is what we need to be doing going forward. But you can't just do it that first time. You have to do it, change it up a little bit, and do it over and over again. Like with myself, I have one company where we have a platform we use when policies come out because I write all their policies. I turned it into a gamification piece. So they get tokens for understanding the policy, and it's like a little test, like a little quiz they get. And so those things will come churn out every week till it becomes a norm. And the other thing you can do inside of a company is to adopt technology that takes care of some of those policy issues. So if a policy comes out that can be solved by like automation or chatbot, why not do it that way? Because it's easier for staff to understand and play with a chatbot than it is to sit there and say, hey, here's this 300-page new regulation we have, and you got to figure it out and make sure you follow it. So, yeah, that's policy fatigue. It is a problem in healthcare. And I think it is often overlooked because I'll give you an example. One company I was with, they were having a survey, and when surveyors come out and they will talk to staff, the surveyor spoke to a staff person and asked them a question about regulation, and the staff person said, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. I didn't know that was a thing that we were doing or whatever." So once the exit interview occurred, the CEO was very upset. He was like, "We just had a memo about that. How could she not know that?" So I was like, well, because she gets those memos every week. She probably no longer looks at them as, oh, I've got to deal with this and that type of thing. It's constant. So policy fatigue is a thing. I don't think it's a staff competency issue. I think it's more than that. I think it goes deeper into say, hey, we're over inundating people with these policies. We need to find a way to have people interact with policies that sticks with them, and that it doesn't become that piece of paper on the wall that, yeah, I know it's there, but I'm not going to worry about it because I've been seeing it every day. I think that's the best thing we can do. Find ways to let staff work with, and like I always say, live with policy in a way that works for them.
I feel like I keep coming back from what you said to this idea of habituation, and it almost feels to me as if instead of making it a habit or committing it to muscle memory that you follow one particular policy, the habit to build is to actually adapt to all the changes as they come, right? So that's what you want to ingrain. And I wonder, other than this gamification piece, is there anything else that you found that's particularly useful to, keep staff not even on their toes, but like to prevent this policy blindness, if we can call it that?
I think, like I said, clarity. I don't think that we go far enough to clarify, like, per department and per person what something actually means. It's like most companies, like I said, because we don't overly invest in new regulations in a way that's concrete, we tend to just pass it down the line like, oh, this new thing came out. I think it needs to be more clear to the individual. So streamline and simplify the communication. Don't bombard them with everything that's in that policy update. You want to translate it into what it means to their day to day. So what it means to, like, if they're interacting with patients, explain to them what that is. and have them repeat it back to you so they know what that sounds like and what it looks like. And so you want to give them quick refreshers every once in a while. Like you said, outside of gamification, you have to do it in a way that's more native to them. I always stress because people tend to think of this as an HR issue. It is not just an HR headache. It's risk patient safety, reimbursement, all the things, reputation around compliance, right? So you have to keep the staff engaged in policy in a way that works for your practice and especially in a way that works for them. So if you know there's a lot of complicated languages in a regulation that comes down, take time to break that down and make sure it makes sense to the individual. Even saying that, "Okay, say that back to me. What do you think that means?" Get their opinions on it and then hash it out. If you are having conversation, they'll have that recall later. If you don't talk about it and you just hand them a policy, "Hey, this is the new regulation we have to follow," chances are they're not gonna retain all that information because they're not using it in real practice. It's just something that handed to them. You have to be reinforcing that in a native way in your practice. So, if I got a, let's say we got a regulation and develop some policies for how to have patients sign in. Some staff will still sign in the way they were signing in patients. But if you start making it look a certain way, okay, we're giving out incentives for anybody who has 100% patient sign in the next 30 days. The person is more likely to pay attention to how they're supposed to sign a patient in instead of just making sure the patient just signs in. So that's what I mean. Put it on a level they understand it and on a level that will help them help themselves, if that makes sense.
I find it so interesting that whenever I dig deeper into these issues, because this reminds me of some previous conversations on the podcast where we were talking about, interdepartmental cooperation and, making sure that there's good teamwork between departments. And then what it boils down to is have productive meetings, introduce this was just last episode. I don't know if they'll be published in the same order. What I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, you have to remember that adults and toddlers are not so different from each other. What I mean by that is if you have some interesting rewards, if you make this, I hesitate to use the word fun, but at least engaging for them, it might seem like you're dumbing it down, but actually you're increasing your chances of success. And if that's the ultimate goal, then, the way you get there is might not be as important. Or actually, it's an ends justify the means kind of situation. What you've been talking
Yeah, it's
about too.
like we always say, what we learn in kindergarten, we should carry with us through our lives. Learning to share the information, learning to use your words to communicate. All those things still work when we're
Yeah,
adults, right?
exactly. I in my work, I like color coding, I'm the last person to take out colorful highlighters in real space, so to speak, like on a piece of paper. But when it comes to sharing internal documents like a Google Doc, I love to color code. This is green. It's already done. This is yellow. It's in progress. This is red. We're blocked
You're a
here.
man after my own heart. That's me too. Most of my clients now color code, but yeah, I do believe in that because, like I said, it's something that makes something stand out to the next person, and it alleviates some of the headaches and it alleviates like skipping over things. If I see something I know on my calendar that's in purple, I know what that means to me, and I, deal with it a certain way. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Exactly. Don't ignore the way that your most simple parts of your brain work because they drive a lot of your actions. I wanted to add in what you've been talking about also reminds me of a book. I don't know if you read that one, but I wanted to add it and we'll put it in the show notes. It reminds me of the Checklist Manifesto. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, I love that book. I tell people about that book all the time. Where Dr. Gawande, I love that book. It's on my
Yeah. Do you
bookshelf.
mind talking about it then?
It's yeah. I mean, it's the idea that if you, I don't want to say list stuff, but if you categorize, I would like to say categorize stuff and make it, a task oriented, checklist kind of thing. You're more likely to get it done or achieve those things. I'm trying to think what's the best way to put. I'm such a fan of Dr. Gawande. I don't want to mess up his book, but I've read it twice and I've given it away as gifts at least 3 times. But I think everybody should have that on their desk to read, right? And to use it in a way, because I'm one of those people, I tend to compartmentalize and I like to do like checklists. I journal and I use a planner either online or physically. I believe in those things because I'm like, if you see it, you'll achieve it. And it's a very important thing for people to realize. I don't know how many times a week I asks people, "Well, why haven't you written that down?" And I don't mean like take a pencil and necessarily write it down. I mean create some type of compartmentalized list of things you when they say to me, "Hey, oh, I forgot to do this." I'm like, "Did you write it down? Did you, record it in some way?" And when they say, "No, I thought I would remember." Well, here we are. You
Exactly,
didn't.
exactly.
So,
That's
yeah,
yeah.
I love that book. That's a great book. It's not even new. It's like it's maybe 10 years old now.
I think over that, yeah. I read it initially, that was already like 5 years ago, and it was not a new book at the time. Anyway, so we both really recommend it. What I wanted to add is, one of the examples there is, like, airline pilots, right? So the capabilities of a plane or, like, the procedures there might change from time to time, but again, what's in their mind is not to do things a certain way. What's in their mind is take out the checklist, follow the checklist, and I feel like that's how you can in a changing environment, actually keep standards, uh, you know, complied to. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about within this area is so, I know you're excited about policy, you're in that minority, you're also excited about technology. So I wanted to ask about the intersection of the two. So on the one hand, there's of course, the advice you already shared, on how to try to build the right habits or to, prevent policy fatigue, but there's also the technological part of it. So could you talk more about, how technology can help in the realm of policy? What kind of technology would you like to see adopted by more practices? Because again, this is reaching an audience of practice managers. What should we put in their minds that they should start doing here?
Oh gosh, I think the easiest one to say would be automation, right? So if you look at how policy workflows are, automating a lot of those tasks. My favorite thing, I probably have said it a million times, is probably transactional inefficiencies and practices. Like when it comes to like your billing, your revenue cycle management, that's like automate the heck out of it. I say so because there's so many policies related to how we finance healthcare, how we get paid from healthcare, how we code for healthcare. Automate it all. No one has to sit there and do that by paper anymore, which shocks me that so many practices still have a paper-based operation. And usually when I walk into one and they explain their process to me, I automatically say, I 100% am not doing this. We're going to change this right away. Put some automation in place. I think the pushback against some automation is the loss of control. I don't think a lot of people realize that it has nothing to do with the technology itself. It's the loss of control. You don't know. How do we know it's getting right? And I always warn people that technology makes less mistakes than humans. So when we are worried so much that it's going to get it wrong, it's like, if you think that's going to get it wrong, you should see the mistakes you've been making thus far. Look at your, if people look at their explanation of benefits, their EOBs and claims that were rejected and stuff like that. If they look at, they can automate that process, they will see less of those things happening because machines, and I'm a introvert, so I love machines. Machines take those tasks. A machine has one task, that task. We as humans have several tasks. So we're more likely to get some of those tasks wrong or not completely right. So if you can automate a task that's going to lighten your load a little bit, why not do it? So my first thing with tech and policy, I would say automate as much as you can. The second thing is like role-based alerts and dashboards. I love this. So with so many people having to with compliance with credentialing, which is a headache across healthcare, I always say role-based alerts. If you have somebody who their whole purpose is to ensure that nurses' licenses are updated, make sure you have a process in place that alerts them when a nurse's credentials are due for renewal or 30 days out or whatever, so that those tasks can get done the right way every time and have their own dashboard for it. And a lot of systems don't incorporate those. Like when we look at practice management, no one comes in when you're setting up your practice and say, "Hey, we've got these role-based alerts built in." It's just not done. But you can have your systems made to do that. Like with one company, I use their actual internal communications dashboard to create role-based alerts, and they were like, "I didn't know we could do that." I'm like, You're paying for it, you can make it do whatever you want. Just tell the developer that's what you want." So that's another place that can happen with policy. Integrated learning systems, so micro learning modules embedded into EHRs for your staff and for frontline staff the whole place really. If you can give them micro learning modules or practice management software that can turn compliance into like a native thing, that's a great way to help people comply with policy and regulations, and you lessen the risk of not being compliant.
Let's go back to the last one. You said micro learning modules. Could you help me understand what those look like in practice?
So if you say let's just take a tablet for instance, if you're EHR and information in micro learning modules are these little bits of information that help you learn that pop up every so often that says, "Hey, did you remember to code this, or did you remember to put this in?" It allows you to learn what you are supposed to do, and what it's doing is getting you to build a habit of doing it. So it's a tiny little bit of learning because no one wants to be working in an EHL and have to learn a whole module. But they're little teeny tiny bits of information that you get along the way that you continuously get until it becomes a habit. I've seen it work wonderfully, and I always encourage it's like micro learning is like micro dosing. Do it till it's a habit.
Wow, what a note to land on. I love that. It kind of reminds me of I'm a gamer, right? And sometimes when you play a video game, there's a loading screen, and the developers use that loading screen to give you a tip. Like, I don't know, you're playing a strategy game, press Control A to select all of your units, right? I remember that from when I was a teenager. So I suppose is that similar? Am I kind of in the right ballpark
It's
here?
very similar. You know how sometimes the games will say, would you like to skip the tutorial?" You know what I'm saying? When you know the game. But in this reference, you want to say, "No, I don't want to skip that tutorial. Leave that in because I don't, I'm just learning this thing." So yeah, you're right. It's that. It's just like a little micro type of thing to get you through the scenario until you can master it.
So I like that, and the connection just came up from from left field. And then you mentioned, or before that, you mentioned those role-based alerts. I was wondering if a practice manager asked, okay, which of these do you think are the most important to set up first? Let's say we have 0 of them, right? So which one would you start with?
Well, let's see. If you've been doing it, I would say the first thing to do is actually, I'll say blanketly, whatever task that you can automate, do that first, right? So if you can put automation in place, like I said, with your revenue cycle, 100%, we should all be doing that already because it lessens the episodes of bounce back claims and problems for reimbursement and that type of thing. So anything I'm a huge believer in automating any task you can automate. And it also takes a huge load off your staff when they don't have to do, tasks that are so repetitive. My least favorite thing within practices that I think are horrible for patients and horrible for frontline staff is the repetitive action of having to fill out paperwork when a patient presents for their appointment, right? Let's automate that whole thing so that they can do their paperwork before they get to the office. When they come into the office, you don't have to go through that whole routine that patients hate, and they're ready to be seen and you're ready to receive them. It cuts down on the amount of time that a patient has to be in that outer lobby, and it moves patients back at through at a quicker pace without making them feel like they're not important. So automate everything, I always say. So the second thing I would say is the role-based alerts, because if you can break down, like I said, the policies we get, they're hundreds of pages long. These rules we get that come out. If you can break it down, instead of sending like updates to everyone, if you can, if you're intelligent, if your system's intelligent enough, and like I said, a lot of this can be built in from the person who builds your system can automate some of these things. So have it to deliver the right policy changes to the right person at the right time. That way, they don't have to comb through hundreds of pages of text to get to the part that's meaningful to them. And like I said, the other way to do that is to just put it into one of these LLM models and ask the model, "Hey, let's say I'm in patient billing. Can you tell me what part of this rule is for me and how it works?" And break it down that way. And you can ask it as many questions as you want. But I think that's very important because, like I said, if you give your staff a new rule that came out or a new regulation, and it's hundreds of pages long, not only do they not want to read it, their chances are they're going to miss something. So always, if you can, instead of sending every update to everyone, deliver the right policy changes to the right person at the right time when they need it.
I do wonder how AI is going to change this process moving forward because I already see companies, ours included, creating these kind of internal, sources of information, these gurus, right? So like instead of combing through the policy itself or even through like a summary of it, you just say, my situation is X. What should I do, or what's the most important information for me? I saw you got visibly excited when I mentioned that.
Yeah, I love this because like I said, I deal with a lot of CMS final rules and proposed rules and that type of thing. So this was last spring, maybe last summer actually. Time is passing by so quickly. But I started developing a dashboard for to have those things automatically update when they come out. And then I had a gentleman with a company I was working with do it, so it automates that task. So if CMS puts out a new rule, my model will automatically update it and say, "Hey, here's the rule. Here's what you're looking for. These are the automatic tasks." So for me, it's like I'll say, "Okay, if a new rule comes out, this is the prompt I give it. If this new rule comes out, identify A, B, C, and D, and put it in a summary sheet, and then put it in a blog post for me." And it does all that, and without me having to do anything.
That's so cool.
How awesome is that, right? So imagine if you did that for your staff. Like, use these AI models to not only update them on the new rule that comes out, but to tell them, hey, this is what for your department specifically, this is how it's being interpreted, and this is how you should go forward from here. It cuts, it gives you time back with patients. It gives you the freedom to do your work and not have to worry about reading all this stuff all the time. I think that's one of the places practices can really help their staff by using some of those workflows within the LLM models, within the AI models to do those things, set up those tasks. Now, it does require some prompt engineering. So if you're not really good at that, you should definitely work with a consultant initially. But once you have that down to what you need and where it needs to come from, you can, you don't even have to worry about code now with the models we're using to set up those automated tasks. And I love it. Like I get a summary every week now. I set it up so that I can get a summary on what I'm looking for every single week. And so if something changes, I can pull it and then create create a blog post about it, or something engaging from my audience. They don't want to read policy from me. They want to read what that policy means.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I like that. You're really speaking my language. A lot of what you said here for me is, little pieces of validation for what we're doing here at Talkie as well. So you mentioned like anything that can be automated, the stuff that's easy to automate, it should be automated. And that's kind of the mission we're on here. For example, you've still got scenarios where a patient calls a practice just to ask if you're open on Sunday, or can I pay by credit card? Are you open on Thanksgiving? That's one of the things that our agents do, that, it should have been automated a while ago. And of course, there's the website and, there's other ways to get that information, but some people still prefer to call. So I'm glad that, we can be part of that change that I think we both see would be beneficial to the industry. For more on that, because I guess I went into plugging territory, go to talkie.ai with your watchers and listeners to find out more. And in the meantime, gosh, I feel like we've opened a few topics here that I would love to dive deeper into, but our time here today is almost over, so we'll have to find another way to do that. Maybe run a webinar sometime, or something else. But I always, at the end of those conversations, I feel like I want to talk more. I want to do more content together. This was great. My excitement notwithstanding, I know that you publish a lot of your own content and you speak and you train. So there's more ways to engage with you and learn from you. Could you tell the watchers and listeners where they could find you to find out more?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn at Hit Reset, and Reset is spelled REESET. So Hit Reset on LinkedIn, or Shereese Maynard. I don't know if it comes up that way, but it's usually Hit Reset. I'm on Twitter as Shereese May MBA, and I'm on TikTok as Shereese. Oh no, I'm on TikTok as She Hit That, because that's was my thing. And I'm on Instagram as Shereese M. So yeah, they can find me on those platforms. I love talking shop. It is not a issue for me. I look forward to talking to anyone from your audience. Oh, and do we have time for me to give my book recommendation?
Yes. Yes, we do. Definitely.
So one of the books I wanted to recommend, that it's a hard read, but it just, to me, it helps us in healthcare. So I always say start with the problem in healthcare. One of the books I read, this is going to seem strange. It's called Symptom to Diagnosis by Adam Sifu, Dr. Adam Sifu. It is really written for medical trainees, right? But it holds a powerful lesson for those of us in healthcare, how to get from the actual problem in healthcare to the solution of the problem, which I think is always in healthcare a terrible problem. I hear more people giving me a solution to problems that don't exist. So I would say, hey, this is the equation for how you get from the problem to actual solutions. And that's the book I use to write some of my theories on how we can adapt some of those things for healthcare. You can use it to signal, dive deeper until you identify the underlying causes that we see in healthcare and actually solving the problem instead of bringing a lot of things to market or a lot of things into your practice that you just don't need. So, yeah, it's a hard read, but it's so worth it. Symptom to diagnosis.
I'm sure we have some people listening to this or watching this that do appreciate a hard read where they can still glean something useful. So thank you. We'll put that in the show notes and the link to your LinkedIn in the show notes as well. So people don't need to second guess anything there. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check this out in our YouTube description. If you're watching this on any of our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., go check that out as well in the description. And yeah, I think it's really important to always look at how we can get from like a surface level symptom to the real source of certain issues. So I might pick up that book as well. And I'm glad you came prepared with a recommendation. Not everybody does, but it is in the briefing. So I know you read the briefing.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But I love books. When I saw it, I was like, oh, I love talking about books. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Shereese, thank you so much for coming on the show. And this is one of these episodes where I'm kind of sad that it came to an end. The time flew by, and I'm really glad we could have this conversation. I'm excited for the watchers and listeners to continue the conversation with you, and I'm glad we could record this one. But for today, unfortunately, that's everything we had, dear watchers and listeners. Don't forget to check out Scaling Practice Management, like I mentioned, on YouTube, on the podcast platforms. Check us out. Leave a rating. Follow us. Make our numbers go up. It gives me a nice dopamine hit when it happens. So, keep me in mind. And in the meantime, that'll be all for today. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And you too, Shereese, thanks for coming on the show. And thank
Thanks for
you
having
all
me.
so much for listening today. And see you next time. Bye bye.